So I want to welcome everybody to Startup Grind Houston today and thank you for joining us. You know, over the years, because it will be 10 years this summer, our chapter was formed here, is I've been amazed the importance of the arc of the meaning behind our chapter, the values that we actually live from, which are really three simple things, but it's been fascinating to watch how important that's been to integrate into not just what we do together for our community and our members, but how we actually operate ourselves. And I think that's going to lead to some interesting points in our conversation today. And that's three things: make friends, not contacts; give first before you take; and help others before you help yourself. And so, as we're thinking about that, there's 600 chapters around the world, there's all these startups and entrepreneurs who are contemplating what does it mean to go out and make a difference in the world. I thought it would be really important for us to bring Erin Corine Johnson on today from Ola Magnolia. And she is over in Spain because one of the things that I love about being a global community is how we get to have global friends. We get to have a network that's all around the world that allows us to really live into our vision and the mission of our businesses. So, welcome today, Erin.
Thank you. Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Could you share with everyone a little bit more about what is it that you do inside of Ola Magnolia and what kind of vision you have for your business so people can get a sense of who you are?
Yes, thank you so much. So, Hola Magnolia is first and foremost a concept. I want people to always understand, first and foremost about Hola Magnolia is that it represents the moment in which every part of who you are has permission to exist. That's the number one concept of Hola Magnolia because it really literally represents a moment in which I felt that I finally had permission to be everything I was, everything I am, and everything I will be. That I was allowed both by myself and the environment. I was kind of nurtured and and held by everyone in my immediate surroundings in a way that allowed me to flourish and flex and flow between all of these versions of myself that were informing my path as a coach, as an artist, as a creative, as a woman, as a Black woman, as an immigrant in a foreign country, on another continent, right? So it's and really not a foreign country because you have to flip the lens. Like I'm the foreigner, not them, so foreign to me, but the person outside of their born habitat, their native habitat was me, right? And so Auto Magnolia first and foremost represents that concept and that idea of internal congruence and then the externalized version of congruence, which is then moving into belonging and all of the ways in which we search for belonging, in which we prepare ourselves for being able to recognize when we feel and can find and can cultivate a sense of belonging. And once we have found that, where we go from there. So Hola Magnolia, beyond that concept, is essentially it's a social impact company that is rooted in coaching and mentorship, international community building, and also diversity, equity, inclusion, education with a really, really strong foundation in anti-racism. So what it really does is it's a container that holds the different areas in which I myself as an individual work because I am a sole proprietor. We finally incorporated Ola Magnolia this year, which is really exciting on the 5th anniversary of the origin story. I was finally able to incorporate, and this is something that's so beautiful because it was crowdsourced through my LinkedIn network through a project that I do through my company called the Reparations Race, which we can talk about another time or later in the conversation. But it was so meaningful that Hola Magnolia came into tangible paper document official existence through the community that I built as a result of its values and mission. This was just such a wonderful thing to me. So what I do is I help other people build communities like that in their own surroundings, in their own homes, in their own spaces, whether they are physical in the real world or they're online or wherever they may be. Because as we know, the pandemic really kind of forced us to reckon with what it means to have community, whether that's only virtual, whether that's only in person, whether it's some hybrid of the two. It's just really helping people understand, first and foremost, who are you and what stories go into the makings of you. Beyond that, where do you feel that you are fully nurtured and accepted in that truth, which is the idea of finding a place to belong? And then beyond that, it becomes more about the community work. So a lot of the things that I do after coaching and mentoring someone for whatever reason, which they come to me, which usually starts with foundational coaching, life coaching, mentorship, things like this, it usually moves then into, okay, now that we have done this inner work, how can we bring that to the surface and now find people with which you can live this purpose, you know? And that's how Ola Magnolia has evolved from just being a holding company for my own freelance coaching and education and things like that into actually a pretty established international community, both in person and virtually, where people are looking to do that inner work so that they can more congruently live in their own purpose. So that is the, if you can believe it, the short story as to what Ola Magnolia is. What I do hope it evolves into is something that continues to kind of give, to actually have tangible resources to offer people as they build their communities, as they build out their purpose, as they continue to do that inner and outer work with themselves. But for now, it's mostly a coaching company with a very firm social impact mission.
Well, and that's another thing that's been fascinating to watch materialize, not just in the past 3 years where people's awareness is actually increased around it, but social impact companies were around before the pandemic, and yet there was an interesting kind of acceptance and dynamic where you can hear in people's conversations them wondering, well, is this really going to make a difference? Is this just another feel good label for a nonprofit? And there's an interesting dynamic in the startup world around businesses, startup, what constitutes a startup, what constitutes where investors will place their money. And the fascinating thing that I'm finding as I'm listening to more entrepreneurs like yourself talk about their journey is that people's minds are finally opening up to a different, beyond awareness, a different desire for those things to be intersecting more. What are you seeing, since you are at a global level and have been functioning at a global level? What kind of behaviors are you seeing changing around that dynamic?
Yeah, this is a really great question. You are absolutely right. I think one of the things that the pandemic, for many reasons, both from the standpoint of public health, of global health, to the concept of just that extraterrestrial, existential, will the earth even be here x amount of years from now, to the very practical, the very economic, the social, the relational, right? One of the things that a lot of investors have been confronted with is, when, if any time, is should my economic priorities lie in people over profits, and vice versa? Is there an acceptable moment in which profits should come before people? And I think this is where the social impact, where varying degrees of social impact and the associated social impact models come into play, where we really have to talk about, okay, I'm going to time out. I am for profit. I'm not, I'm gonna be really clear about it. I'm for profit, and there are a few reasons. It's one of the reasons is because I believe very firmly in reparations for descendants of chattel slaves, or enslaved, the descendants of survivors and enslaved Africans that were put through the transatlantic slave trade. I have to always be mindful of my language, because we're moving away from saying slaves and to say the enslaved, by not defining people by the circumstances that unfortunately they were forced into during their lifetime. So I am very, very passionate about reparations for descendants of enslaved Africans that were taken during the transatlantic slave trade. And in whatever form that takes in many countries throughout the world, because obviously we know the United States is not the only country to very, very, very tangibly benefit from that free labor that was never repaid to neither survivors nor their descendants. It's really important that we think about all the ways in which we have to define core values according to our mission. So, because one of my number one priorities is raising awareness as to how we can um, create movements around, like micro movements around impact that will then make a bigger ripple effect that outlives and outlasts us, right? So all this is to say, I am for profit, and it's because one of my missions is raising the awareness and sounding the alarm around community-led reparations. So I feel that not only do I have kind of some ethical questions that I can't really answer for myself around the nonprofit sector. And of course, that doesn't mean every nonprofit is corrupt or every nonprofit is working in some shady way. It's to say that for me, to embody those values, I am for profit because I know part of my mission is to facilitate the redistribution of resources according to an equity model that does first and foremost prioritize descendants of the formerly enslaved, right? And so that was a long way to say one of the things that I find to be very, very difficult this day and age as an impact founder, as someone with some sort of social cause attached, is this automatic categorization of your organization or your business as political. Now, do I personally feel that a business that does have conversations around reparations or around liberation of any kind, diversity, equity, inclusion, that is inherently political? Yes and no. Yes, because yes. Like what century and what year are we living in? Yes, there are a few issues that are not either inextricably linked from politics or are not inherently almost synonymous with a political movement, a political struggle, or a political status quo of some sort. But also no, because human rights are something that we are starting to feel are more basic and fundamental to the experience of any individual person, and that first and foremost, everyone should have access to food, water, and ability to sustain their own lifestyles, and so on and so forth, right? So by this vein, what I really feel right now is hard to really bring to the table with a lot of investors is this idea of what does it mean to profit. If we speak only in terms of money, then a lot of investors are going to be like, well, this is something that not everyone cares about. It is very politically sensitive. It's something that people may or may not invest in, or people will immediately divest from if they feel that there is a political undertone. Therefore, I cannot guarantee an immediate or even a reasonably medium or long-term return to justify investing this into this, right? In return, in this case, they're talking specifically about capital, about money. But then when we talk about other types of returns, that's when we toe that line between altruism and what's in it for meism, if that makes sense, you know? And so for this, I want to loop in a quote that I gave Sharon Hurley Hall. For anybody that does not follow her on LinkedIn and all of the places, she's an incredible diversity, equity, inclusion activist, anti-racism activist, mostly anti-racism. That's her number one platform. Her latest title is called I'm Tired of Racism. Please go out and get it. It's amazing. Follow her and support her on Coffee and also on Substack. One of the things that I talked about with her in an interview I did for her anti-racism newsletter back in May and June, it is that there is change that we will see, and that is change, and there is change that we will seed. And unfortunately, at the surface level, for most people, we are unable to connect to the change we will seed part, because it, implies an extension beyond our mortal existence. And that's something that a lot of people just do not feel comfortable thinking about. And maybe some do, but not beyond the benefit of their own immediate family, their own descendants, their own children, their own grandchildren, or people that they care about, right? They rarely think about it in this larger impact scale. Again, one of the main differences between social impact founders and other types of founders, where the return on investment is money versus a return on and return on investment being a chip off of the block of liberation, you know? So I think that's the number one thing, is that more investors have to understand that if you want to invest in social impact businesses, endeavors, organizations, for profit or non, you have to have a more evolved relationship with the concept of a return on investment. And you have to have a more expansive definition of a return on investment, and understand that in a social impact model, the concept of ROI is less monetary and more conceptual, intangible, and it's more about how can you move the needle forward on collective liberation in a way that is sustainable but still measurable in this lifetime, as we then cultivate the soil for future generations to continue that same work.
I hear in that answer so many different additional conversations I'd love to have in the future. my my mind is like going, ooh, go this way, ooh, go this way. Nope, y'all decided on a focus today.
That's what I love about this being recorded, so we already know what our next lanes are going to be.
Right?
Mhm.
Well, let's come back into an area that we agreed to talk on, and it's wonderful that you laid this great foundation um, for it to be seen in a different light, and that is belonging, and why that matters to entrepreneurs and founders. Because I've watched people change, and then I've watched some people not change. I've actually watched them almost revert back
Evolve.
to a generation before them. It's kind of
Yeah.
fascinating. Human behavior, I always find, is fascinating. But I choose, like you, to continue to focus on who wants to help us evolve forward. And so when you talk about belonging, and you want to bring in the conversation for entrepreneurs and founders to start also recognizing how this affects them, how it affects them to be able to communicate their vision and their mission. How does it affect the foundation of what they're going to build? How does it affect who they bring on to help them bring that to life? Why would belonging be important?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is a good question. I'll explain it as organically as possible without sounding like a textbook audiobook accompaniment. But essentially, what I want people to understand about the importance of belonging is the first and foremost concept that I started writing about and ruminating on more is the idea that belonging cannot be enforced. Belonging can only be affirmed, right? Which means that it is the power to define and to confirm that belonging is being experienced lays in the eye of the beholder being the members of that community, being the members of that team, the contributors to that organization, the employees of that company, or the leaders that are co-leading a team. Whatever the sentiment, and whomever is the person that is leveraging the balance of power, that is the person that is fully beholden to those that are participating in that structure for the benefit of the person that is carrying that structure, whether that's a company or an individual or a group of individuals. And so what happens when belonging is experienced, and more than experienced, when it is prioritized, right? When people fully understand what it means to create safety psychologically, physically, mentally, spiritually, in all of the ways, emotionally, right? One of the things that I think is most important about belonging is that um, it allows people the space to almost flex 360 degrees of themselves, rather than only feel that they can put their best foot forward and be accepted. But the moment that they are less than 100% of themselves, they're no longer valid, they're no longer worthy. Because if we think about the concept of 100%, it's a very delicate number to maintain. 100% means full, means capacity, means a little bit more, and the receptacle might break, right? The person could just completely lose it after being given that extra amount of work or that extra amount of pressure or even that extra amount of attention, visibility, whatever the case. But any little thing can start to chip away at that capacity as well. And so what belonging does is it ensures that every degree of a person has influence, has importance, and has impact in the context of an organization. And the way that we practice not only allowing 360 degrees of a person to exist in an organization or in a group or a team or whatever, it's also on the lead on in earnest the task of the leader or the organization or the structure to practice recognizing and seeing the value in and affirming 360 degrees of a person, right? Because at the end of the day, what it is a person being confident and affirmed enough in their own identity to show up as 360 degrees of themselves. Not saying you have to overshare and every detail of your life has to be on the table, but every part of you that you want to be there, you should be allowed to bring it. But then on the other side of that, obviously there is a caveat. If it's harmful to other people, then that's another conversation we have to have about this concept of weaponized inclusion, right? But that's another conversation as well. But then on the other side of this 360 degrees of being comfortable and safe to belong is that practice piece. It's making sure that our leaders, that our the people that we work with in organizations are being armed with the competency foundation in order to be able to honor, recognize, and then honor 360 degrees of the people that they have in front of them, whether that is the people working in their organization or on their team or in their company or the community that they serve, right? This is literally cultural competency 101. It's the ability to recognize the value in someone at every level of themselves and allow those people to contribute the best of themselves according to them, and then be able to say, I was allowed to exist in this space as all of me. I was given the reasonable accommodations to be able to take a step back when I'm feeling tired, or I feel that something happened out of work that's taking me out of this space. I feel nurtured. I feel not just like an asset, but I feel like a human, right? And this is that entire movement of helping people understand that part of being you is also having a sick day. Part of being you is needing accommodations for neurodiversity or seen or unseen disabilities outside of neurological challenges that some of us experience, right? It can be time to observe religious practices during the day. Whatever the case may be, seeing 360 degrees of someone on the part of the people in power involves accommodations, it involves conversations, and it involves continually expanding the definition of what it means to fit the culture of an organization. And in turn, what an organization is given in terms of affirmation that belonging is being felt is that expression of such to say, wow, my company sees all of me. I feel safe here. I want to stay here. In fact, let me see what it would be like to explore upward mobility through this company or lateral mobility through this company and invest more of my time and my space and myself in being here. So belonging is really this this circular feedback that first and foremost is practiced, that's opening up of space to feel that sense of belonging on the part of the people in power or that control an organization, and it is affirmed by the people that are being invited into that space in that organization. And so it becomes this feedback, right? This bilateral feedback of, do I experience belonging? Yes. Great. Let me do more of what helps my employees and the members of my community feel belonging, and repeat cycle.
You know, I'm sitting here and thinking as I'm listening to you that besides the leader and the inner team, there's some beautiful repercussions that can come from someone being able to activate, oh god, that's not the right word, finding new words as we navigate uncharted areas or just something that is, oh, word, new to
I don't
us?
know.
What
I
is the
think
verb?
activate is a beautiful image. Activate was a beautiful image for me. It
Okay.
might not be the word you were looking for, but it resonated. It resonated
Well,
because
I love activate, but
every time
not
you
how.
open up more, what happens, real quick, what happens when you put a plant that's already thriving into a bigger pot? Its roots begin to deepen.
Oh.
That's activation. That is a form of activation. What happens when it has more space in the soil? The roots deepen. And what happens when the roots deepen? More shoots start to come out of the plant. It continues to thrive. It doesn't mean it wasn't thriving before, but it means that you are continually exploring ways to open up more space to see just how far that plant can grow. Activation sounded good to me, Michelle.
Thank you. Sometimes people see activation as a push energy.
Hmm.
Obviously, it has a wider definition than that, but being so language conscious and also welcoming everyone to be more word and language conscious, and to just give people space for when their brains are searching for something but haven't quite landed on it. To me, that's an excellent model that we're doing right now of helping people to understand the essence of belonging. So when we think about the founder itself with their journey of belonging, and then the interactions that can happen with their own team as they're building their business and their startup with belonging, I'm seeing this. I'm seeing this as a really big potential for that whole "our people don't engage" answer. But then, of course, the futurist in me is also going, and with and because customers nowadays have a really different lens for where they want to spend their money and what they want in return for it, they don't. What I'm noticing is they're not satisfied with a simple exchange anymore. They want to know, how are you going to activate those resources that you just received with your business. And so I'm wondering, what can belonging also look like when it radiates outside of your startup and your business, and what kind of impact that could have?
What I heard first and foremost, so I don't lose it, I can't wait to look back at this conversation, is people are moving from exchange, the desire for an exchange, to the desire for an experience. That's what I hear. And I think it again, it takes me from the linear, it's got continuing along this idea, the difference between seeing this one side of someone versus seeing 360 degrees of someone should they choose to exist in your organization in that way. Maybe that person only wants to give you 95 degrees of themselves. That's fine. Maybe that person only wants to give 185 degrees of themselves. That's fine too. But the at the intersection of those, of all of those options, of all of those identity pieces and all of those factors, is choice, right? That's the idea. So moving this back into the customer, customer or the client experience, the community experience, is that, right? Moving from the transactional to the, here, take my money, here, give me this product or give me this thing, or, and maybe it is an experience, but it's an experience that doesn't involve the person who is providing the experience. The person, it's for the client. So an experience can still be transactional, but in this particular wordplay, I really want to drive home the fact that on one side, we're talking about a transaction, the other, we're talking about an interaction. Okay. And so what I see in this particular kind of realm is really understanding, how can there be feedback in the relationship, even if we're talking about a company to a client, or an organization to a community, or a teacher to a student, or any of these things, right? It's about, how can we create space for feedback? And I think, to your point about seeing some people reverting back to past generations way of moving through the world, of relating with money, capitalism, service, all of these things, how we had this really huge surgence in the 2000s of the customer's always right, and customer service, I feel like in the States does really it has really, on one hand, placed a like a just really raised the bar on what it means to serve, but almost in a toxic way, because that's how we've had this culture of the customer is always right devolve into Karen's situations, right? And remember, I want to be really explicit. Karen does not correspond to necessarily to a race. It is based on an archetype. It is an archetype. Now, while the overwhelming majority of examples do involve white women, Karen is a whole energy. Karen is a collection of archetypes, but the common thread in this way of relating to this I want to talk to the manager energy, it's that I want to talk to the manager so that I can continue to manipulate a situation until I get what I want. Not I want to talk to a manager to better understand where we went wrong here and how this experience can be better in the future. That's a totally different experience, and it's one that places the responsibility of creating a place of belonging, or creating an experience in which each person in the interaction belongs, not only on the company, i.e. the customer is always right, but also on the client. I want this business to thrive here because this place is, or this organization or this company is providing a service that I need. And I want them to know that I value the expertise, the time, the resources, the energy, the employees, the man, woman, people power that goes into keeping the doors of this company open so that I may partake in the service that they offer. Right? I also, as a customer, have to let these people, this company, or this founder know that they belong in this community, or they belong in this
Ecosystem.
market,
Yes.
right? In this ecosystem. Exactly. Right. And so I think shifting from the transactional, me as a company, great, I get my money and I can make my profit. Me as a client, okay, I get my product and I can go on about my business. It's like, how can we put that responsibility in earnest? How can we share that responsibility of bilateral belonging? How can we create a relationship that shares the responsibility of belonging, that splits it between the client customer community and the company founder organization, you know? I
I'm
feel like, a good
starting to
model for
hear
this are
people's
schools. I
heads.
think schools sometimes work like this. I think schools, and when they work well, when a school works well, it is a better example of this multilateral question of belonging, right? A lot of schools don't work well enough in that realm, but I do think schools some institutions might give us a blueprint closer to this ideal. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
I was going to say, I think what happens too is one of the things that used to happen quite a bit when I had my global business radio show is I understood my listeners, and the fact that Startup Grind is around the same amount of time that I did that 10-year community. I hear them almost sitting on my shoulders going, yeah, but, yeah, but, yeah, but. These are the realities that I deal with. And so what I'm hearing right now is we have an opportunity to have a continued conversation, but to also acknowledge what are some of the yeah buts that might be coming up in people's minds as they're listening to us. And I can totally hear people saying, I don't have control over how other people behave in the business transaction. And I'm like going, you do have influence in creating the environment for it to be different. You do have influence in when you do the work on yourself, how you show up and how you communicate and how you let them know, here's what I'm trying to do with you, that influences all that. So if you don't just shirk it and set it off to the side and say, that's an unreasonable expectation to hold on me, then now you're taking responsibility as a leader in a way we need future leaders to show up now.
Yes, I love what you said, that you don't have control, but you do have influence, and we cannot negate that point. We all have influence. There's push and pull. Every interaction, there's minimum of two parties involved. You can go your corresponding percent of that distance to meet someone in the middle. You can't force somebody to come to the line, but whether or not you come to the line and how you come to the line might influence whether or not someone else follows your lead. Absolutely. Actually, yesterday I was watching a TED talk by Lovia J. Jones, and it was sent to me by a very dear client, and we were definitely developing this multi-dimensional client relationship and client friend, like just lots of these things. Because I feel like a lot of my clients always toe this line between can have really good conversations. I think it's a testament to I'm really attracting the people that I don't just want to work with, but I want to be in a community with, and that's really beautiful. And so she sent me, because she knew that I really needed to hear it, and that also it's very aligned with some of our conversations. That this talk by Levy that really talked about being the domino, and I think it's a really important image to have in our heads, because is it possible that dominoes that are set up and stacked up are, it's a very volatile thing, because you knock over one domino and the likelihood that they'll all fall is very, very high. It doesn't always happen that way, because it can be angled in such a way that one doesn't knock over the rest of them, or vice versa, right? There's a lot of things that influence, but overall, if the setup is right, if the setup was more or less right, the execution is going to garner the result that you're looking for, which is that all the dominoes follow suit. But I do really love that idea of being the domino, right? Of being the domino. And this is to say that you don't control the outcome, but you can put in work that within a reasonable amount of projection, based on your own lived experience, based on data, based on other people's anecdotal evidence, because anecdotal evidence is empirical evidence, and I stand by that. It's understanding that when you have all of these bases covered, the likelihood that being the domino creates an impact that you can then measure in the outcome is very, very high. And that's just what it is. So that's what I love about what you just said, because it's recognizing that, no, I can't control the outcome. I can't control someone else's behaviors. I can't control someone else's anything, but I can definitely act on precedent in order to go above and beyond to influence that person's either response or make them feel comfortable enough to tell me what they really think. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I'm gathering out of that nugget of wisdom that you shared. So thank you for that.
Yes. So we've gone a little bit over on our time, and I do my best to always honor your time as well as the community when we tell them we're going to have a 30-minute conversation. But oh my gosh, it was there wasn't a cutoff point. We had to kind of finish the thought process. I do want to give you the opportunity to share an invitation with anyone who may have felt sparked by something from the conversation today. How can people choose to work with you?
Yes, thank you so much for that invitation. So right now I'm in a very transformative and transitional phase in my business, and then also as an individual creator. So then there's two ways to work with me if you feel that these foundational concepts and identity and belonging, both personally as in internally and externally. There's two ways to engage with me right now. Number one, I have a page on a website called Coffee, where you can support Ola Magnolia monthly. And what this does, monthly or one-off as well, what this does is this supports a lot of micro series that I publish on LinkedIn. This supports also doing some posts on Coffee itself as well. I'm starting to post some things on YouTube, not with any concrete end goal, but basically it supports all of the content creation that I do under my own personal coaching brand, the Identity Belonging Coach, and Ola Magnolia as an impact seedling company, right? So that's one way to support. That's Coffee, which is ko-fi.com/Ola Magnolia. So if you would like to work with me, you will see a commissions tab. So ko-fi.com/Ola Magnolia/commissions. And you'll see what my offerings are right now that have a particular price point, because they are beta versions of products and services and different coaching frameworks that I am now in the process of working into concrete programs. So what you'll find is intro to identity and belonging programs, 60-minute Ask Me Anything sessions under the DEI, in the DEI realm, and a couple of other things that you'll see coming up in the next couple of months. So that's the first thing. And secondly, the most important is that I just announced on my 36th birthday, almost exactly 3 weeks ago, that I am writing my first book. And what is so special about this project is that it is a multidisciplinary memoir project. There is coaching framework involved. So I tell my story, then I give you a blueprint to to write your own story, whether that's literally you're writing a story or you're just writing the story of your life as you live out your purpose in the work that makes you feel happy, whole, and human. Okay. So what you can do is you can contribute to my book advance campaign. I'm self-publishing, but I'm also raising what would be the equivalent of a mid-sized book advance from a publisher should I have pursued that route. But since I'm not, I'm fundraising so that I can focus on the publishing process and still offer limited but not too many coaching hours that would take away from the time that I dedicate to writing. So those are the two ways to support. You can do coffee to support Ola Magnolia Identity Works, or you can support the production and the publishing and the launch of my first creative body of work called the 4We Project. So I will give Michelle all of those details,
I was
and
going to
thank you
say,
so
and
much
we'll
for the
have those
support.
links in the event page to make it easy. Because I trust you, nobody's got a pencil and writing all it. Most of the
Sounds
time,
good. I
they're
will make sure.
most of the time they're either jogging, walking, exercising, and listening, or they've sat down, they've grabbed a cup of coffee, and they're like going, "All right, so what am I going to learn this month?" I
Yeah,
want to thank you for
exactly.
joining us here at Startup Grind Houston, and I look forward to us figuring out how can we maybe have some kind of special extra conversation that continues to open pathways for everyone to learn how they can step more firmly, step more confidently in the space of what does it mean to create belonging inside their companies.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again for the invitation, and thank you all for listening.